Hello and welcome to Conversations today. My name's Lacey Sheldon. I am a librarian here at McIntosh Memorial Library. Today's conversation program is about the history of round barns here in Vernon County. And we have three guest presenters today. We have Kevin and Patsy Alderson. Hi guys. And Lyle Bernau has joined us today too. Hey Lyle.
Morning.
Yeah, good morning to everybody. Thanks for being here. So we're looking forward to an informal conversation today about the history of round barns in Vernon County. Kevin and Patsy are really excited to talk to us about their book, Barns Without Corners, written by the both of them, and Patsy added in a lot of her beautiful, beautiful paintings and artwork. And it's my understanding that Mr. Lyle Bernau has recently built a round barn in Vernon County. So we're really excited to hear about that from Lyle as well. So how about we go ahead and we'll hear from Kevin and Patsy to start us off, and feel free to chime in whenever you'd like, Lyle. And then once again, towards the end of the program, we'll leave a good amount of time for question and answer and general conversation.
Beauty first?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I can just give you some background to the project itself. And if I start dragging on too long, just basically mute me and move on to somebody else. But it was in 1993 or so that there was a visitor from Vernon County who I have never been able to identify, who was at a national museum at Fulton County, Indiana. And they have a round barn there that they've turned into a museum. They call themselves the round barn capital of the world, which is fine with us. We haven't tried to dispute that or have a competition with that, because they did recognize the whole subject earlier than what we did up here in Vernon County. But the visitor that was there said to Shirley Willard, who was the curator at Fulton County. I should ask everybody here, all right? I guess so. So anyhow, the visitor said, you know, I think we have as many or more round barns in Vernon County than you do even down here in Fulton County. So to her credit, she contacted the Vernon County Historical Society, and they then, after her contact, began to do some research. There was a lady by the name of June, used to be Pedretti, and then when she lost her husband, married Zalewski, and her and the board and so forth, especially June, went around and found all of the barns still remaining in 1993 and photographed and put together a booklet, more like a booklet and or a pamphlet. It was very, very helpful, but far from like a final product yet. And so that's in a sense where it all started. And then they sold out of those pamphlets pretty quickly, or those brochures. They printed 100 originally, and then they sold another 200. And so then they did a book called The Round Barns of Vernon County, a Circle Tour. And it just, interestingly enough, coincided with when Patsy started her art, which she'll talk more about. One of her first subjects was painting the round barns. And one of my jobs that I did, I guess, is I wrote the history, partly based on what was in the books that Vernon County Historical Society done, and part what I did on the back of the cards. So it got to the point where Vernon County had sold out of all, the Historical Society had sold out of all of their books. They stumbled upon us and saw the work we were doing. And they thought, and we thought, the combination of Patsy's art, my additional research, and then the addition of more history of round barns in the United States and an expanded history of Algae, Shivers, and Cheyenne Valley would be a good formula. So it became a joint project between Patsy, I, and the Vernon County Historical Society. And we came out then with our book in 2010. So that's kind of the background to what happened in the first place. That's how the project got started.
Great.
I don't know where you want me to go from there.
Sure. Well, I put together a slideshow that shows the interior of your book. Should we go ahead and have a look through that, and whatever you feel motivated to say, just go right on ahead.
Okay, will
Okay.
do.
Okay, it'll take me only a moment to start sharing that presentation, which I'm pulling up for us right now. Okay. All right, just a few more steps here and we will have a look. Okay. All right, now I'd like to ask, can everybody see the front cover here, Barns Without Corners?
Yep.
You can see it? All right, super. So here, everybody, you can see the history of round barns in Vernon County, the title of our conversations program today, and here on the left side is the cover of Kevin and Patsy Alderson's book, which is available for you to check out at the public library. So here's the first.
If you don't mind, sorry to interrupt, but if you don't mind, if you go back right to the cover.
There we go.
That has a lot of significance because that is Algae Shivers' barn.
Mhm.
Patsy can tell you more about her painting it and where she got the.
Well, one of his relatives had a old picture of it. And that barn is no longer standing. So when I painted, this is the only barn that wasn't standing. The rest of them were standing that I painted.
Mm.
So that is, yeah, that's, and the mailbox wasn't in there, but I thought
Mhm.
to put the mailbox in there. That's what artists can do, you know? So,
Mhm.
yeah. So that, it was fun. It was fun to do.
And that's located or was located over by Valley, Wisconsin, for those folks that are aware of that little burg. Because
Mhm.
Vernon County is filled with places that used to be and aren't anymore, but Valley still remains. in a
Yeah.
small
And if you did
population.
go there, if you knew where it was, you can see on the ground, you can see the round wall where the silo was, the stone. So there's stuff there that is, I mean, so part of the barn, the base of the barn is still there, but if you don't know where to find it, you're not gonna find it, but.
Mhm.
Okay,
All right, very good. Yes, I think the information and of the local history and about Mr. Algae Shivers is a really fantastic thing to talk about. And I believe we'll get there to talk about Algae and Cheyenne Valley towards the end of the slideshow, if that sounds. Yeah, I'd be
That-
very happy to talk about that local man and his contributions to these round barns. And I think I read in the book there, Kevin and Patsy, that this barn was one of the barns that Algae Shivers he built. Is that right?
this particular one, there are a lot of them on here, and if you'd like to have me point out which ones Algae is believed to have built, in some cases for sure, other cases it's suspected. This particular barn was built by another builder whose name was Ernie DeWitt.
Mhm.
And he actually also built several barns, but not the number that Algae and his crew did.
Mhm.
Algae, at one time, there were probably 25 to 30 round barns in Vernon County, and Algae is believed to have built about 15 of those. So there were other builders, but he is the most famous and the best remembered.
Yeah.
So this one is not.
Mhm.
This particular barn is really close to Wildcat State Park, and unfortunately, when they developed it into a park, there were two round barns in the park, and they tore them down, which is unfortunate because now it fits so well into Wildcat State Park. And now this barn is also the people are taking care of it is now red. They re-sided it, so this one is actually red now.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, great. Here's-
Yeah. This barn, is actually on the, is that?
It's
is
the
that one?
original Harris Place. It's down in the only barn that still remains, round barn, in what would be considered to be the Cheyenne Valley area. And it is an Algae Shivers barn. There's some dispute because the belief is the barn was built in 1906. Algae was born in 1889, so he would have been only 17 years old at the time. But frankly, when he graduated from 8th grade, he went on to a college for African Americans. It's called the Smith College in Sedalia, Missouri. And so it is possible that already at the age of 16, 17, he and his brothers and father might have been in a position to have built it. But that's, to our knowledge, the oldest standing round barn in Vernon County, and that is an Algae Shivers barn.
Now, this one is on the historical register.
Yeah, Historical National Register of Buildings.
Yeah, and he's been keeping that up the best that he can. He is passed now, but I think it passed on to his son. But as you can see, all these pictures I took of the barns were taken in the month of February, and I just kind of used my ability to change different seasons. So that was kind of fun, trying to decide which barns I wanted and which seasons.
And this barn is located in Dell, Wisconsin.
So
Very-
there were farmers in the
Yeah,
Dell.
farmer in the Dell. And,
Nice.
Interesting.
Yes.
As far as the one still standing, I believe this is the only metal barn.
Yeah.
And as far as siding, and that
Mhm.
is original siding yet on the barn. Most of these roofs have been replaced either because storm damage and or weathering. And so it's not a new roof, but it's a second roof put on there, whereas the siding is still original.
Well, that's so great. That's really interesting, the metal side here. I'd like to give some appreciation to Patsy's artistic skills here to remind everybody that Patsy is the artist behind all of these paintings and photographs. And what a marvelous job you've done here, Patsy.
Thank
It's
you. Thank you.
really beautiful.
This painting is pretty. I talked to Angela Cena, who owns this barn now, and then she gave me a picture of the barn. After I took this picture, I ran into it at the Vernon County Fair, and she gave me a picture with some fencing and cows in it. So again, that's where I took my ability of just combining two photos and making it look like maybe more of what it looked like back in the day when they were actually using the barn.
And just a couple things, this barn is the, other than Lyle's masterpiece, but I'll let him talk about that. This is the only round barn that survives near Viroqua other than Lyle's new barn. And it is interesting in that it's the only tile barn in Vernon County. And so it has its unique history too. That's on DeFreeze. I don't know where everybody's from that's watching the program, but that one is just outside of Viroqua.
All right. Yes, being a Viroqua local, this barn looks very, very familiar to me.
Mm-hmm. And if you wonder about the names, like here, the Sturba, and is that Heiner?
Heiner.
We named the barns from the people that had them built and the people that owned them when we did the book. So some of those names. Now this is one still standing.
No, that barn fell down.
That one fell down. Yes.
So it is gone. It only remains in photographs and Patsy's art.
Mhm,
Mhm.
That's over by a place called Trippville,
mhm. Yeah, well, my dad went to school in
near
Trippville.
near Hillsborough.
Yeah.
Okay.
This barn was really fun to do. I really enjoyed this one just because it was so bright and stuff. If you look at the tin roof, it did not have a tin roof. But when the people went to replace the roof, they couldn't find anybody that wanted to shingle a round barn roof. And so when they went to replace the roof, they put the metal roof on. But this is the first time I actually was able to paint and had to do more highlights of the sun. It was such a sunny day. And as you can see, it has a lot of highlights on the roof and the silo. So.
And
it was
one of the original authors of the book was, before we took over the project, was Gail Fish. And this was her and her husband, John Fish's barn. That's one reason why they got very interested in the project, working with June, because Gail did a lot of the research.
Yes.
This barn is up on Lower Ridge Road, relatively close to Ontario. And it's in one of the better shapes of all of the round barns that remain. It's been modernized quite a bit, and it still is in use for stock, although they do not milk cows in it yet.
No.
Belongs to Wayne Lease, I think.
Right, and they got an addition on the back of it, but, a funny story is we gave bus tours, so we stopped there. John and Gail were very, very kind and let us go actually into the barn so people could see it, and so we go in there and we have the whole presentation, and so we call it the fish barn. We get back on the bus and a lady says, I said, "We have any questions?" She goes, I just don't see it. And we said, "What?" She goes, "Where did they keep the fish?" So
Nice. Was this an Algae Shivers barn?
That one is one that is suspected to be one. See, Algae and his crew built barns, and then Algae also and his crew advised people where if he wasn't the primary carpenter, he still had a hand in it. And
Oh,
so
wow. Yeah, that's
this
great.
This particular one, they with the information known, the fishes thought that it did have ties to Algae Shivers.
Okay, fantastic.
yeah, that one is no longer standing either. In
Mhm.
fact, isn't this the one, Kevin, where actually this was supposed to go to Eagle? Is that the one or is that a different
Well,
one?
they were going to try to relocate and save this barn.
Right,
And the owners of the barn, the Mansers at the time, donated the barn, but the expense and expertise in trying to move it to a different location just didn't happen. And so
Mhm.
unfortunately, it eventually fell down. That is a Shivers barn. That's close to where his house was.
yeah,
Yeah,
there,
fantastic.
this one, Sobranic is really doing a really good job of trying to put this barn back to how it was. He found, like I said, on the back 40, he found the manure bucket and the tracks. Because they would have a round track with the manure bucket to clean the barn, and then it would go out the backside. And he put it back in the barn, which was a big task to do.
Mm.
He did remove the silo in the middle, though, correct?
He removed the silo and then put together a different structure to help maintain the integrity of the building itself, because at least these barns that had silos in it, the silos also were a factor in helping to hold up the barn in the first place. And so he did take the silo out, but he did build a structure to reinforce it. And he uses that for storage. So it's still in use. It's a useful building for him on his farm. And that one is located up in a little tiny place called Mount Tabor,
Mm-hmm.
just outside.
Yep.
You know, I feel really fortunate that I get to hear both of you speak about your book and to see the picture here in the slideshow, but I also have your book, Barns Without Corners, next to me, and I'm looking through the pages of each book, of each barn as well, and I really appreciate how your book has a bit of extra history in it as well. When we're talking about the location of where this barn is, it says here in your book that it's some of the originally purchased land by Nathan Sherman in 1856. So, you know, that's around the time where pioneers and settlers were really starting to acquire land with their own name. And yeah, so I just wanted to say your book is really interesting and fascinating.
Vernon County, which was, I got to be careful with the pronunciation, Bad Axe originally, 1851. And then in 1862, partly because they took some ridicule at the state legislature about the name. And also it had negative connotations because of the Battle of the Bad Axe. They changed the name from Bad Axe to Vernon. But the Vernon County, as we know it now, was founded in 1851. The town of Forest was incorporated in 1854. And Nathan Sherman was one of the very first settlers there. You know, it doesn't show the land purchase until 1856. He was there even before that.
Wow, that's so great. Thank you for mentioning that.
No problem.
Now you can see there's only one name on there because it was built for the Liskers, and they, at that time, so they're the only owners of the barn, so it stayed in the family for, of course, many, many years.
Wow.
And it's still in the family.
Yep, as far as we
Wow.
know.
That one is just right outside of Hillsborough, was not built by Algae Shivers. So that's again, another example of another round builder, a round barn builder.
Okay. Wow,
Only-
that's really so fascinating when we think about family farms. Here is a great example.
And it's kind of interesting too with how names get changed, because Lisker was Liska. And most of the folks over in Hillsborough that have that name still go by Liska. But in this particular case,
Oh.
it changed to Lisker. And so
Wow.
they have Bohemian backgrounds. I mean, we could talk about immigration to Vernon County, but that's another subject altogether.
Yeah.
So,
That could be a future program, Mr. Kevin.
Okay, this is owned by the Amish. He would not let me take a picture of the front of the barn, which was okay. We went on Paz Road, which is a back road down by Bloomingdale. And went up Paz Road, so I took a picture from that road on the back side. And it has a lot of additions on it. And if you look at the picture, you can see on different sides of where the picture I took. But I took this one and decided I wanted to maybe what it looked like when it was first built. So this one is probably the one that doesn't look as much like the picture as, you know, it would. And then, of course, I decided I wanted to make it winter and snowing, so.
Okay.
I might add, this is the only remaining multi-sided round barn. If you take a look at it closely, it's still classified as a round barn, but it was not perfectly round. It was built in sides, which makes it appear to be round. And generally speaking, those barns were built, not always, but generally before they evolved into true round barns. Washington, in fact, has a multi-sided barn, which still remains on one of the plantations associated with Mount Vernon.
That's really fascinating. And this one is a bit closer to Westby there in Bloomingdale, correct?
Mhm. Yep.
Correct. Another
Okay.
thing I should say real fast, John Evenstead in our book, and again, I don't want to run out of time by running my mouth too
Yes.
long. But John Evenstead was so gracious because he grew up on that farm, and there's a 2-page kind of like part that he wrote talking about the use of the barn, the fun with the barn, the fact that he was racing his tricycle around the barn and the back wheel hit the gutter and he went in head first into the gutter of manure, and just some really fun human interest stories like that. So I want to give John Evenstead some credit. He lives down in Dell too. He's a very fine person, him and his wife.
Yes, absolutely. That's just great.
Okay, as you can see, there's a pile of sawdust in the picture I took. I decided to put a wagon in front of it. And that one is the one that was still being used. I don't know if it's now, it's really in bad shape. So I don't know if they still milk in it, but when we went to visit them, they were still milking in there and using it. And it was really funny because if you look at our book, I think we have a picture there where the cow's back legs are over the gutter. Do we have that in the book or not? I mean,
Yeah, that's might be in one of the pictures you have at
Yeah.
the end where it shows the increase in size of the cattle compared to
yeah,
what they
I
used to be.
mean, they had to put a board over the gutter so the cow didn't keep stepping in it.
I think she has.
Mhm.
Yeah,
later on.
Mhm.
so that was kind of interesting, but anyway.
And that's on a place called Burr Ridge over by Hillsborough.
Oh, yeah, it's close to Mount Tabor by the other one. Yeah. Okay, this one is still standing, isn't it?
Nope, it's down.
That one's down too?
Yeah.
Yeah, sad. I guess this was down too. I can't keep up with them. But again, this had a lot of machinery around it, so I just kind of painted it to make it look like maybe what it would have looked like years before.
Algae Shivers Barn again
Great.
over by Trippville.
So I believe that the photograph of the cows that you were speaking about would have been just right, it's right underneath this photograph here.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I guess we can see here is this, if we're looking at the bottom right photograph on the screen, this would be where a gutter would have run here
Yeah, and
on
that
the
barn, in
curve.
fact, this barn, which is now down, was modified so that you could, a cow, in fact, could um, be between the stanchions and the gutter. And so the one down below, if anybody looks at the book, sometimes checks it out, then you'll see where the cows are standing yet, and their feet are on the other side of the gutter because they're too big for the barn.
Right, because if we're looking at it, the length here between this is would have been their sanctions, is that right? Did I use the stanchion? And
Stanchion,
then, so their heads would have been in here,
correct?
and then their front legs here and their back legs here. But nowadays, the dairy cow is a much larger animal,
Yeah.
and so it would not fit on this little platform here.
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of people went from Jerseys and Guernseys to Holsteins, and Holsteins are significantly larger than those other breeds. Also, I want to point out, if you see the one silo that's twisted,
Yeah,
it says silo twisted by storm.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
That,
top right.
Yeah, that is one of the problems with the barns. They had a lot of advantages and some disadvantages. And one was the freestanding roof essentially set on the wall plates. And so it was possible for a storm to lift that up and twist it. And
Wow.
so that is damage done to the silo and by lifting the roof up and actually twisting it. So it didn't cause it to fall down, but it was never really repaired.
Wow. You can
And if you
really
look at
see
the
it
floor-
too. You can see how it's just twisted.
Yeah. And if you look at the lower left corner there, you see a little bit of metal there.
Oh, here.
Yeah, in that last, that is where the manure bucket would go around the barn and they would scoop in the gutters and then put it in the manure bucket and then it'd go out the barn to dump it.
Yeah, it's almost like it was a shuttle
Yep,
bucket, if you will.
like,
And then there's a hay rack or hay track, same concept up in the loft where they had a track where the hay forks would, after you backed into the mow, would pull the hay up and then it would reach that track and then you could take it wherever you wanted to drop the hay. So they would fill the barn that way or fill the hay.
And they would have put the hay, if we look at the bottom right corner, they would have put the hay somewhere right in front of the,
when they're
Well,
feeding,
actually, see, you're on the first floor there where the milking was done. And then there would be a ceiling above that where the mow was. And so it's
Yeah.
really like two levels. Down below was the milking parlor or
Mhm.
where they milk cows. And then up above was where they stored hay, stored feed and so on.
That's great. These photos really help me understand the functioning of round barns, which hopefully we can mention a little bit more of once we get our way through the couple more slides.
Sure.
yeah. That's pretty much explains it, well, that says that their barn's no longer standing, we just took
Mhm.
the photos. We didn't take those photos because they weren't standing, there were photos that we were able to get, and I didn't paint them.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it really went from 16 barns when they started looking at it. And then a couple more fell off and then it got to the point when Patsy painted them, there were still 10 standing and then one fell from that point. But Lyle now has us back up to 10 by the addition of the barn that he built.
All right. Yeah, I was curious about that now, how many are currently standing, and the answer is 10.
Yep, with Lyle's new one. And that one's
Alright.
gonna stand pretty much forever.
Yeah,
I think.
that'll stand for a while.
Yeah, I really look forward to hearing from Lyle here soon too, as well. But here's also a page out of Kevin and Patsy's book. This is talking about, here on the left side, you can see a very young photograph of Mr. Algae Shivers. And he is the man who built about 15 of these round barns in Vernon County. We can see here, I use the word architect because even though he was a very talented carpenter, when I see these barns and I see these interior photos, I mean, what an accomplishment of architecture that they are. I mean, this does not seem like a very non-complicated type of structure. This is using a lot of angles and I'm sure just, different methods to have built these outside of putting a square rectangular, smaller type of building together.
Yeah, and that's why, again, we have so much respect for the builders that had the skill to do that. And so much respect for Lyle, who's waiting there in the wings with some really interesting things, because he built this. And so, I mean, not anybody could do something like this. It takes a lot of skill, a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of research. And we are just so gratified that he built a modern one, because we're worried about all the rest, will they survive or not? But
and the LG and Thomas Shivers thing right here, this is where we won't, like, we'll just talk about that. They can ask questions at the end.
well, again, another separate program might be Cheyenne Valley. That's up to you in the future. But see, Thomas Shivers was Algae's father, and he was a slave in 1857 in Alamo, Tennessee. And so he was a slave, and thus Algae was the son of a past slave, and that added to the whole story. And Cheyenne Valley is such a deep, long subject, which I don't even want to start to touch it, but it's of national significance to the point where there is an exhibit at the African American Museum in Washington at the Smithsonian about Cheyenne Valley, which was a settlement here in Vernon County.
Absolutely. And you know what's really great news for people who continue to be interested in the topic of Cheyenne Valley? The library has just recently produced and released on our YouTube channel a photographic video essay about African American heritage in Vernon County. And this is a project that the library worked on with the Vernon County Historical Society. And we had Ms. Barb Stanek of the Cheyenne Valley Settlers Historical Society also contribute. And she is a relative of Mr. Shivers.
Kind of
So,
an adopted granddaughter.
Yes.
Great course.
Yes, really fantastic stuff. That YouTube is available on the library's, that video is available on the library's YouTube channel.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay.
I liked it.
Great. Thanks for your feedback.
You bet.
And again, I also included this photograph again so we can see barns by Mr. Shivers. And I just really, this bottom picture here on the right with Algae and his crew, and just seeing that the foundational structure of these round barns, and you can see the size of them, and I just think really, really impressive. And again, here I want to point out that if anyone is interested in being able to see Kevin and Patsy's book, you can order it here. Here's some of their contact information. You could also contact the Vernon Historical Society, and McIntosh Memorial Library in Viroqua also has a copy of the book as well.
And if we could just add quickly, because it's available at Main Street shops up there in Viroqua.
Yeah, at the marketplace.
Marketplace.
in
And then
Viroqua.
Great.
also at the, we always call it the Amish Cheese Factory up on County D, but it's, what's the actual?
Old
name?
Country Cheese.
Old Country Cheese. So they're sold there.
Okay, fantastic. Main Street Market and the Country Cheese Shop.
Yes.
And then they could contact you probably through the website and or contact the Historical Society so they could own their own copy or
Well,
check out.
Unfortunately, that website no longer exists. We
Okay.
don't have the Valley Heritage Art and Tours anymore. So unfortunately, that doesn't work, but.
Okay, well, if anyone is interested beyond that, I'm happy to receive a phone call or an email from anyone who's watching, and I will contact Kevin and Patsy for you.
Sure.
Mhm.
Fantastic. And once again, here is a picture of their book. Okay. So that completes that portion of presentation. There we go. So thank you again, Kevin and Patsy. I guess in the light of time, let's hear from Lyle now for a while, and then we will circle back to questions and answers soon.
Perfect.
Okay, Lyle.
Okay, so I'm getting some feedback here.
Okay.
So my own interest in round barns goes back to my grandfather. I have a grandfather that built a round barn back in 1914. It's in a little town in north central Iowa. He started in 1914 and it took him about a year and a half. He finished in 1915. So we've had a round barn in my family background for longer than I've been around. But I can kind of remember my grandfather's barn when we would visit, but unfortunately back in 1982, the barn caught fire and burned down. So I think it was back in about 2012, I was looking to maybe build a little bigger shed. I have a small machine shed on the place and I was looking to build just a little bigger shed. And then I realized that we were coming up on 100 years since my grandfather had built his barn. So I got the idea that maybe 2014 would be a good time to build a round barn for myself. So I spent 2013 thinking about it. And actually, if I can go back to my grandfather's story for a minute, one of the things that we're told about my grandfather is that when he got ready to build a round barn, he traveled 3,000 miles around the United States, well, probably the upper Midwest, looking at round barns. And my mother told me that in addition to traveling around Iowa, we know he went to Minnesota and Wisconsin. And if you think about it just a little bit, I believe that it's quite probable that my grandfather came over and talked to Algae Shivers because Algae was very busy building round barns at the time. So I think there's probably a Vernon County connection to my grandfather's barn. I can't prove it, but I believe it's quite likely. So anyway, back in 2013, I kept track and we traveled 3,000 miles looking at round barns. I went to Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. Looked at a lot of round barns, took a lot of pictures, tried to decide what I liked, and drew up plans for my own round barn. So in 2014, I started building on mine. I had the concrete pad poured, and from there, I've done all the work myself with assistance and whatnot. So I started in 2014, and it took me till the middle of 2015 to actually finish building it. Mine is 40 feet in diameter and about 29 feet high, which is about half the size of what my grandfather had by volume. And I tried to make it look pretty similar to what my grandfather's looked like, but I tried to dress it up a little bit to, my grandfather's didn't have dormers on it, but I thought that was a nice touch, adds a lot of light in the haymow. And my grandfather had a standard cupola, but that was actually very unusual for a round barn to have just a standard cupola on the top. So I dressed that up a little bit on mine, but it's a lot of work. Everything has to be custom made. And one thing that Kevin and Patsy didn't really mention is that the big problem with round barns is keeping them up. And the secret to keeping them up is to keep a good roof on them. Well, roofing a round barn is very difficult because essentially every shingle has to be cut. You can't have your shingles overlapping or the wind will get underneath and rip them off. So basically every shingle has to be cut to size and put on. It took me almost 100 hours to shingle my barn, and it's not even that big. So that's one of the big downfalls to round barns, try to keeping them up, is to do that kind of maintenance. But I kept track. I got about 600 hours into building mine, and that was in my spare time. I was working full time at the time. So it's a lot of work. I mean, I like to say most people know better, but some of us had to learn the hard way why they don't do that anymore. But it was a lot of fun just to see if I could build it. And it's a lot of fun to have it on the place and use it. I use that for a workshop and some storage in there and whatnot. But I knew Vernon County would be a good place to have one since there's so many round barns here already. I thought it'd be a nice addition and be well appreciated, and it seems to be, so.
Absolutely. And hats off to you, Lyle. Wow, that's really incredible. Can you go over the timeline with us again? So you started the process about, well, more than 10 years ago, huh?
Well, it was about 2012 that I really started
Okay.
thinking about it. You know, I was gonna just add on to the shed that I have, and then I thought, you know,
Mhm.
this is Vernon County, maybe I should just build another round barn. And
That's
since-
incredible.
Since it's in my family history and there's plenty of them already here, I thought it'd be appreciated and a good spot to put it, so.
Mhm. And then it took a couple years to, you know, from breaking the ground to the final shingle.
So I started in May of 2014, had the concrete laid, and it took
Mhm.
me till July of 2015 when I finally
Okay.
did the last piece of trim on it, so.
Wow, that must have been a real celebratory day for you.
So I was pretty busy for that year and a half, but it was a lot of
Yeah.
fun to do, and
Absolutely.
Oh, Lyle, when you
Absolutely.
talked about the shingles, that's exactly why the Fishers put on a tin roof. Because they could not find anyone that could do it, and especially do it in their price range. So as much as they
well,
wanted.
that's the problem with the tin roof. You can't just slap on a tin roof either. That all has to be custom made, and it depends on the size of the barn. So that's not that much cheaper, although it should last probably longer than shingles.
Yeah.
I guess I just want to say that Lyle was gracious enough to let us barge in unannounced, and he took us all over and looked at
Yeah.
the barn, went up in the cupola, and I only want to say it's fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
So if he doesn't want to say that to himself, I will say it. It's a fantastic building.
I'm currently looking for a picture of your barn, Lyle, on the old Google. If I could find one, would you be all right with me showing that?
Sure.
Okay, let's see if I can find it here. Excellent. So do we want to talk a little bit about why round? If that's probably a good starting question, why did they choose round?
Well, from the research I've done, and one must remember that the research I've done mostly was on selling points as to why to build round barns. Because as Lyle has pointed out, there are reasons that you should not build a round barn too. But as far as originally they sold it on the idea, especially of feeding cows, because with the silo, those that had silos in the center, then all the cows were faced in a circle so that the feeding perimeter was very, very handy because the feed was right there. And the circumference as to where they were feeding was relatively small. As Patsy pointed out with the manure buckets, it also was relatively, it's never easy to clean a barn, but it was all, they were all pointed in the uniform right direction. And so I won't get into the great details with that. Another factor was they said that having the silo in the center had a tendency to keep the silage from freezing because it was warmer in there. At the same time, I've read that if it did freeze, though, it was a lot tougher to get it to thaw out. And so it was supposed to be more wind resistant, supposed to take less materials, but Lyle knows more about that than I do. Supposed to be a very efficient use of space. Since it was a freestanding ceiling, except for the silo and the wall plates, there was a lot of open area for the mow, so you could store a lot of hay. And back in the day, then a lot of that hay was stored loose and not baled. And
Okay.
so the opposite side of the coin, as Lyle mentioned, is once electricity came to the farms and such things as milking systems and barn cleaners and larger sizes of herds and the difficulty in keeping them roofed, keeping them maintained, even something as simple as the development of square bales, which didn't stack as nicely in a round barn. It's almost like they were state of the art when they were first built, but their efficiency was kind of passed in a relatively short period of time.
Well, thank you for your comments on that. I mean, these round barns are really historical gems to our heritage of dairy farming and agriculture. Now, Lyle, I did find a picture on the internet. You know, it does not say this is Lyle Bernau's barn, so I hope that I don't get this wrong. Does your barn have a large wooden, like, a large white garage door on it?
Yes,
Okay. So can we see this? Is this your barn, Lyle?
it is.
Oh, phew.
Isn't that beautiful?
Nice. That's a
Yeah,
nice barn.
it is gorgeous. It's so beautiful.
Yes.
That is just incredible, Lyle. Well done. Round of applause.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for contributing this this beautiful architecture and building to the, you know, to the county. It's really nice. Well done.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, I think someone could live in this barn.
Yes.
Like it could be a home.
It's fantastic.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I'm Beverly. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm from Pennsylvania. You're looking at me from York, Pennsylvania. And
Oh.
I found out about round barns on my visit to your town of Viroka. I have a daughter living in Viroka. I can't remember how we found out about round barns, but I had them take me around Vernon County looking at round barns. And I am familiar with Patsy and Kevin's book. So I visited them twice now, and I do have photos, and I do have a sort of a history of your round barns. I made up a history of what I've seen. So I'm very pleased about round barns. And my state of Pennsylvania would like to claim having round barns, but they do not compare to what I have seen in Vernon County. So you all can be very proud of that. And my daughter, Ann, she is part of your radio station, and she notified me about your presentation, and I couldn't pass that up today. So
Awesome.
thank you very much for your presentation.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Beverly. It's nice to know that you've been to Vernon County and you appreciate it here, and we're sure lucky to get to have you on today. Let your
Yes.
daughter know we say thank you as well.
And I do want to second what Beverly said, because the first round barn, other than one Washington had, and he didn't use it for dairy farming, one of the very first is in Massachusetts, near Pittsfield. It was built by a religious group which were nicknamed the Shakers. And that was built in 1826, well before the round barns in Vernon County. So Beverly is totally correct in that there were round barns earlier in other states than there were Wisconsin, partly because we were founded later.
All right, thank you, everyone. Are there any other questions from the crowd? From the audience attending today? I'd also like to invite the participants. There's something called a chat box, and that's located at the very bottom of your screen. You can type in a question if you would like to, and I would be able to read it for you.
And don't be bashful. There's no such thing as a bad question.
Right, when I was starting to learn about round barns, I didn't really know a whole lot at all. So it took me a while to kind of understand what was going on internally of the round barn, which I just find fascinating when you think about the milking parlors being on that bottom level, and then the hay mow being much larger on top of it and full of hay, that the cattle must have been nice and warm and cozy all winter long in that kind of situation. So it's really that farmer's ingenuity that is really pretty amazing.
Hey, Lacey, can I make a comment?
Of course, yes, please.
So I've been a veterinarian in Vernon County for 40 years, and I had the opportunity to work in at least one of those barns. It was owned by an Amish man, so I missed the beginning of the presentation, so I'm not sure what. Yeah, so it's just interesting that, you know, early it was such an efficient structure, but, you know, working in much more modern facilities and comparing the two, you realize the inefficiencies of walking around in circles and trying to, you know, if you're milking by hand, it probably doesn't make much difference. But yeah, this is very interesting. It's a very cool presentation. So I appreciate being part of it. And I just wanted to tell you that there's some of us that I don't feel that old yet, but I guess I am, because I actually worked in one of those barns.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for the conversation, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown, could I just ask you quickly, because we haven't been in there, I assume they still milk cows than the Amish gentleman in the barn?
I don't know, because I haven't been in practice for a number of years now,
Okay.
but probably, you know,
There was a Hershberger. Are you talking, is it the Hershberger barn?
you know, there's one
Yes.
up on County D. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
Oh, that one's torn
That
down.
one's torn down.
Yeah, I'm not sure. My memory's fuzzy on where else there might have been two that I was in, but yeah, I have some memories of doing some pregnancy checking and looking at cows once in a while in one of those barns.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Amish gentleman, I think on D, someone had told us that he wished he wouldn't have torn it down. He tore it down and built a barn there. And so I don't know if that was true, but I had heard that through the grapevine. But the one that, as far as I know, the one by Bloomingdale that belongs to the Hershbergers is still being used, but I don't know if it's for milking or just, you know, what they use it for, just to store hay. I'm not sure.
And really,
Yeah, I know where that one is. Yeah.
okay. And we really should add before the program gets over that it's been so tragic to see the round barns go down, but it takes a lot of money
Yeah.
to maintain them. There's no real source of the money other than out of your own pocket. And as Mr. Brown just said, the efficiency was there, but it's not there anymore. So to keep them just for aesthetic reasons, or to be lucky enough to have Lyle build one just because of his history, is really important, because I don't know what the future of the round barns are. There is one in Eagle, Wisconsin, at Old World, Wisconsin, and so that one will be maintained. But and I guess the other thing I was going to say is not only the round barns going, so many of the other just beautiful rectangular barns are going. And in Vernon County, the tobacco sheds, it's just so hard to see all those beautiful old buildings become obsolete and not being able to be saved just because there isn't monetary resources to be able to do it.
Well,
No,
I really appreciate that you guys have done the book, and I think we're going to have to buy a copy. But that is the way we're going to preserve this, is by written material, I think, and memory. So that's thanks for doing that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
That's so great. And we do have some questions coming in here from the audience as well. And what we were just speaking about there could dovetail right towards this question, which does anyone know of any resources, such as the government or other, that provide for the preservation of these barns?
The only thing I had heard, and it's been a while because we wrote a book in 2010, we've done a lot of projects since then, so I'm revisiting the project. But at the latest we had heard is there were some tax breaks involved. But beyond that, there was kind of like a program for the preservation of barns, but there was no money in the program. And so it was kind of a hollow situation. And I can understand the problem. The problem is they're privately owned in most cases. So therefore, tax money to support private buildings, I guess, is probably frowned upon. And that's why we've always felt bad about the two barns that were in Wildcat, because that would have been public money in a public state park, and you could have it could have been justified to use those for some purpose. In fairness there, though, how many of us didn't appreciate the things that were there until they're gone? And I think that's what happened to a lot of the round barns. And the novelty, the knowledge about them around here didn't really catch fire until the 1990s, and they had already been standing for 100 years, and many of them were gone.
If I could just speak to that question for a minute. I'm actually a member of the Iowa Barn Foundation. It's a private organization in the state of Iowa, but they take a lot of donations. And if you have an old barn that you want to preserve, they will give sizable grants. And I think it's the third Saturday in September. There's a setup where people open their barns and you can go around and look at barns that have been preserved. And there are a few round barns in that number that you can actually go look at.
That's great.
It's fun to go to.
I know Iowa has one. I think there's also a Wisconsin Barn Foundation that does something similar. I mean, they help, but it's not as much help as is maybe necessary, but there is some help if you have an old barn you want to preserve, I guess.
Well, good to know.
Great to hear, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I was recently talking to a woman who was on the board for the Cheyenne Valley Settlers Historical Society, and they are currently hosting a fundraiser to build a round barn-esque pagoda in the park in Hillsborough that has been dedicated to Cheyenne Valley settlers. So I just wanted to share that good news that there is also plans underway for a potential round barn-esque pagoda. Then that would be also for the Cheyenne Valley Settlers Heritage Society. And that is a community that Mr. Algae Shivers, the round barn builder, was directly a part of.
Just
So-
Patsy and I are both members of the Cheyenne Valley Association. And
Great.
it's been a project years in the making,
Mhm,
and it's always been about funding.
mhm.
And I don't think it's my place to share where some of the funding's come from, but there's been some money that's come available to make the project more realistic. as
Well,
far
that
as
is
getting-
such great news.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's just fantastic. That's excellent.
Lacey, can I ask Lyle a question?
Absolutely, please.
Lyle, you said your grandfather was in northeastern Iowa? Or North
Central Iowa.
What community?
A little town called Whittemore.
Whittemore. Okay. Were there other round barns in that area?
I think the county he was in had maybe 2 more round barns.
Okay, interesting. Are
I'm
any
not-
of those still standing?
There's one other round barn in the county I know that's still standing. We're not sure just where he got that idea, but back in the day, if you were going to build a round barn, you were considered quite progressive. So he would have been considered a progressive farmer back in the day.
Wow, that's good to know.
Well, thanks for that question. There is another question here that has been written. And I think we did cover this briefly, but maybe a little bit more about, does it take more material to build a round barn versus another style of similar size?
I guess the answer is no. Kevin hit on some of the advantages of round barns earlier, and he mentioned that it takes less material. That was actually one of the original selling points for round barns. And one of the big advantages where you save material is that if you go inside your standard barn, go on the haymow and look up, you'll see a huge wooden support structure. In a round barn, you don't need all those big posts and beams because the structure is basically self-supporting. So it takes less material because you don't need all those big posts and beams. And also, geometrically speaking, a circle is more efficient than a square to enclose a given square foot of area. So, for example, on my round barn, there's less wall space than there would be on a square building of the same square footage. So it's less material. The downfall is that everything is essentially custom made. So it's less material, but you spend way more time putting it all together.
Mhm. Well, thank you for answering that, Lyle. This is so fascinating. It's just so interesting to learn about not only the history of these round barns, but what it also requires in modern times to build a round barn. We're really fortunate to have all 3 of you here today to answer our pertinent questions. Is there anyone else in the audience? We have time for perhaps 1 or 2 more questions and then some closing remarks. All right. Well, we must have covered all of the topics well today. I do want to ask to let folks know that if they'd like to, you could type into the chat where you're joining in from today. That's always fun to know that we're reaching across county lines and state lines, sometimes even international lines. We did have Beverly join us today from out of state, and somebody else has joined us from Orlando, Florida today.
Great.
And another participant coming in from Elroy, Wisconsin. So again, we're just so happy to welcome not only our locals, but other friends who are joining in on the program today. This program has been recorded and will be available on Macintosh Memorial Library Viroqua YouTube channel within a few days. This presentation has also been brought to you today by Vernon Communications Cooperative. They play the presentation on their community channel, TV channel number 14 as well. This presentation is also brought to you by Bader Philanthropies. Wow. Well, thank you again. Any closing remarks from Lyle or Kevin or Patsy?
Well, I would like to just add, for those folks that want to relatively easily be able to research more and see pictures from barns all over the nation, most well-round barns, there is you can Google simply I'm not good at the whole address thing because I hunt and peck when I type, so I just Google things. But if you look up round barns of the US, round barns of the United States, or even just Google round barns, you'll see national organizations, and you'll see barns from Vernon County, but you'll see barns from all over the United States because it's a nationwide organization, and it's free of charge and all that. I go on here all the time. There's a guy by the name of John Hanu from Indiana who's done a lot of work and written some. Patsy and I call our book a coffee table book. He's written some scholarly, long, detailed books on the subject, and so ours might be as good as any source for Vernon County, but there are some really good sources out there nationally.
Oh, and Lyle, I would think that something similar would be true for this the Iowa organization that you're involved with for the round barns as well. What would somebody search on Google to find out more about that round barn association you're a part of in Iowa?
It's not Round Barn Association, it's barns in general. It's called the Iowa Barn Foundation. They do have a website, but the website Kevin was talking about is really the one I would steer you to. I think it's called daletravis.com.
Yes.
You look at that, he has a registry. They list pretty much every known barn in pretty much every state. They're very detailed. There's pictures of the old barns. There's directions. There's a small history. You can find my barn on there. You can find my grandfather's barn on there. If you want to know where the round barns are, wherever it is you're at, look on that website and it'll tell you where to go.
All right, excellent. That also reminds me to let people know that the Winding Rivers Library System offers a digital resource that's called Echo. And what Echo is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photographs from Western Wisconsin that were taken, a very long time ago. So we're talking about historical photos that any person can browse through as well. And I think I'm sure they have a section about agriculture. And again, if anyone would like to know more information about Mr. Shivers and the Cheyenne Valley, please check out African American Heritage in Vernon County on the library's YouTube channel.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And with that, I believe we could conclude our program for today. Thank you, everyone who attended. And thank you so very much to our presenters today, Kevin and Patsy Alderson and Mr. Lyle Bernau. Thank you all. Have such a nice day.
You too.
Yep, goodbye.